having me. So to quickly introduce myself, my name is Zonza. I work at Apify as a full stack developer, and my particular interest is developer experiences, as already told. And before we get started, I'd like to ask you who's mostly into front end?
Yep.
And who knows React query? Okay, yeah, good enough. To give you some idea why this topic became a thing in Apify, I have to give you a little bit of context. So, yeah, on a timeline between dark.js history and bright TypeScript future, we in Apify are somewhere roughly in the middle. It's due to the fact that for a long time we're held back by a full stack framework called Meteor. I'm not sure if you have ever heard of that. Yeah. I see some scared faces. You can imagine what we're going through. Yeah, because of being locked in with Meteor like for a long time. Not so long time ago we were not able to use Await on backend. We were stuck forever with Node 14, and on frontend we were forced to use really obscure mechanisms to fetch frontends, fetch data that were just way too far from developer friendly. But at the beginning of this year, after migrating roughly 160,000 lines, if I'm not mistaken, we finally broke free. We removed Meteor, and now we are finally able to move on and implement whatever we want. So, early 2024, we adopted TypeScript on backend. We spinned off a fresh new service written with Nest.js, and late 2024, we are finally ready to adopt TypeScript on frontend as well. And challenge like this is also a good opportunity to look on other problems that we are facing daily when it comes to fetching data. So, good opportunity to take a look at those as well and try to develop as many of them as possible at once. These problems, the first one is pretty obvious. We don't have types. We are never sure what the shape of the data we are working with. You've probably heard many times about benefits of using TypeScript everywhere, so I'm not going to go too deep. Another problem that we are facing daily is discoverability and overall documentation of this backend. And I checked this morning, and there is approximately 500 endpoints that we can call. Just way too much for everyone to know, especially for newly onboarded colleagues. And the last point that is far less important than the previously mentioned is that we'd like to do some automatic response parsing and validation, just to be able to transform strings into dates, which is something that we do manually at this point. And while dealing with these issues, there are also other aspects of this whole effort, and that's basically, as you see, we want to be able to adopt this whole thing incrementally, and we are also after low-hanging fruit, because after removing Meteor for like 3 months, more than 3 months, and I'm speaking about the whole engineering team, we definitely want to avoid any drastic migration. So, that brings me to task that we have for today. I'd like you to imagine a database of your choice. I'd like you to imagine a backend of your choice that implements a single endpoint, which is supposed to return a list of invoices for a particular user. And then you also have a single page app written in React, but not necessarily React if you're using something else. And the question is simple, like what tools you would use for this task and how. And also, just a little disclaimer, if I accidentally offend some technology, that's alright. We don't have to like the same stuff. Anyways, first example, first approach to dealing with this task. Just for completeness, I'd like to showcase how some fancy frameworks like Next or Remix would deal with this task. As you can see, the code is just beautiful. You have all the types at hand if you have typed ORM or data layer, and yeah, it's just nice. It works, but it's not really suitable for our team because while dealing with the issues with types and while dealing with the issue with discoverability, the effort of going with framework like this is just way too high, and yeah, the benefit of doing so is questionable in our case, because I'm not sure if you know Amplify, but we need to present a lot of data. A big portion of it needs to be live updated, so even if we did something like that, we would still not escape from the need to fetch data from client too. So yeah, this is kind of another approach if you want to fetch data is using a GraphQL server. Also at this point, I believe that most of you have heard at some point about GraphQL, and so some advantages and disadvantages for those who didn't hear about it so far. GraphQL is amazing because through a certain point you can always define what data you need, and you can just fetch it. You can basically define what data and how it should look like in here, and you will get it. I like this technology, I do, but still, it totally changes the way you fetch data from client, and that is also the biggest reason why it's also not really suitable for us, because like in the previous example, the cost of migration is just way too high, and I think that the efforts are even lower than in case of adopting some framework. So next library that you can use if you want to fetch data from the client is React Query. I ask you, who knows it? There was a lot of you, so there's not much need to go deep. But it works as this. For those of you who don't know, React Query is really a go-to library if you need to deal with any kind of promises, like calling the backend from your front end. You basically give it a promise, and based on the fact how it's resolved, you will either get data or the error. You'll also get a bunch of metadata on top of that, like whether it's loading, whether it's fetching, a lot of it. But these three things are, in our case, all we need in 95% of the cases. And we already extensively use React Query right now. So, and because we are really focused on the data of this migration, adopting or not adopting, but extending this library would be perfect for us. So the question is if we can do it, if we can extend it somehow so we can get even more out of it. So let's look. The first option that you can have if you use React Query in JS codebase and you want to migrate or start using TypeScript is to use the built-in generics of the library, which is already written in TypeScript, so you can just take advantage of that. The only thing that you need to do is to just import the type and use it right here, and the response should be typed. And I concluded, you'll get the types, you won't get the discoverability, and the number of benefits is not too high. Another option that you have if you want to make this whole solution a bit more type safe is to use some open API client generator like Orval, but there's quite a lot of libraries that focus on something similar. they work in a way that you will just give it open API specification, it will crunch it, and it will auto-generate hooks that are just ready to use, like this one, which is, elegant solution for some use cases. For me, not so much, because while you get the types, you won't deal with the discoverability, and for me there is just way too much code generation, because like the first step is to generate the open API specification from the net backend, and then there's another step of code generation which takes this spec and generates the code. But yeah. Next library. This one is really interesting. It's called like TRCP, and if I quote their documentation, it is end-to-end type-safe, framework agnostic library with Snippet.ex, which is, it sounds intriguing. If you take a look at how it works, on the back end, you basically create some router, or like, you init the library, you will create the router, and it's just tree-like structure. At the end, there is some procedure, which is basically, like you can imagine, an endpoint, and then you will have a chance to type what's at this input of this procedure. You will implement it, and based on the implementation, you also know what the procedure returns. And this itself is enough to make the whole system like end-to-end type safe, because on backend you are forced to implement the procedure, and from this information, if you import it on to your client, you are able to generate like a fully typed client. So you will effectively deal with this discoverability issue that I mentioned, because you have one client, and through this dot notation, you can just get to the procedure that you want, and all the inputs are fully typed. So you know what you need to pass in, and that's it. It's a library that is really a pleasure to use, and the only disadvantage that I see is on bottom of this left part, and that is that it's a server on its own, and I found that this whole library is pretty hard to it's hard to make it work with Nest backend that we already have implemented. So this is the conclusion. Finally, something that looks really promising, but there is this like one step that's in the way. So there is another library which is somehow similar. It abstracts this definition of API even more. They call it API contract, and it's something like similar as what you had a chance to see on the previous slide. Again, you have a router, you can nest it the way you want. It's again like tree-like structure. Then in the leaf of the structure, you have information about endpoint. You have the address, you have, it's not in this example, but you have a chance to like put there a sub schema that will define how query parameters should look like. You can also type the parameters that are inside this path, and you also define what the endpoint returns for specific HTTP code. And if you have a contract like this, you have two things you can do with it. First of all, like you can take it on and you can adapt it on backend, and you can make sure that you fulfill this contract. Another thing that you can do with it is that you can take it to front end and do something similar as what you saw with gRPC. And again, like you can get a client that is fully type safe. You can again get to the procedure that you want. It's built on top of React queries, so you get all the props that you know. And also, I forgot to mention it, like that's a case for this library and TRPC as well. There is no code generation. It's just TypeScript, which is nice. I have a trauma from code generation, so this is good. There is just one small disadvantage that I know about, and that is like this line. I somehow acknowledge that it would be out of scope of this library, but it just feels really weird to be forced to like re-specify the query key every time you use some endpoint, because for a specific endpoint and specific set of parameters, you should basically always have like the same query key. So because I'm like focused on developer experience, this really hurts that it's like that. And yeah, just the conclusion, just to see, and that brings me to the final result. I run through a bunch of libraries and approaches that you can take. Just to quickly summarize it, we had GraphQL. The way I see it, it's just personal opinion. There is a lot of effort and not so much reward. Then we had some framework, which is like less effort because most of the code base could just stay as is, and we would probably also get a little bit more reward because there's just a bunch of stuff coming with all these frameworks. Would be nice. Then we have React generics, low effort, low reward. And then we have I forgot about the generators, which is as you can see. And then we have the two lastly mentioned libraries that are like high reward, low effort, exactly what we are looking for. But these three libraries are somehow discriminated because of the issues I mentioned. The generators are like 2 rounds of code generation, too much. TRPC doesn't go along with our Nest backend. And the TSRS, the API is just cumbersome and not really, as I said. Luckily for us, there's one more option, which is custom integration. And when I was dealing with this task, I somehow saw that TSRS is the closest one to the optimum. So I just checked out the code base. I took a look at the code base of this integration that I presented, and I wanted to address some of the issues that I had with the API. And I found out that it was surprisingly easy to bend the library a little bit to address all these things. And I just wanted to quickly present the result and show the approach that I took. This is going to be a little bit technical. Can you read it? Probably, yeah. So the whole solution is basically, the whole library is effectively really easy logic with some not as easy types, or especially I'm not fluent with TypeScript, so it was hard for me. Maybe it would be easy for you. But the problem I had is that when you call the procedure, you have to re-specify some of the params that should be static, basically. So these are the things. Oh, sorry, wrong screen. So these are the things that I wanted to have statically generated for one endpoint and one set of parameters. And then there is this weird type, which is basically copied from the library itself, just adjust it a little bit, but this is the whole magic. The type is recursive. It just traverses through the app router, and if the specific object that you are traversing through is type route, which is the endpoint specification itself, then you do one thing, otherwise you just recursively call itself. That's the whole magic. That's how the library avoids code generation. And if it's endpoint definition, I want to specify. I want to specify a function that will get like parameters, and it will return like these parameters that I don't want to like specify over and over again. Like this is the only type that needs to be exported, and if you use it with the contract that I already showed, it will force you to like do something like that. So for this endpoint, like users / invoices, something like that, you'll get the parameters that are typed, and you can like define a query. You can define if it's enabled and so on, and you can also define anything else. Like in here, it's just some dummy function, but you can use this to, I don't know, log some exception, or we do it to populate the cache. For example, if you have a list of objects, we can use this list to set the details. And then I had to like a little bit enhance the function that generates the client itself, but again, it's just like easy recursive function, so it's really just about distributing the right objects in right place. And in the end, I could just start using the hook this way. So at the input, there is the typed input that the endpoint needs, and nothing else. It was go. And the conclusion. So we have types, we have discoverability because there is this one client that we can use for anything. On top of that, there is all the other things that I wanted. Like we validate the response. It's pretty low effort. It's really just about 2 days for enhancing this library. Then we can just start defining the contract, but we can really do it like endpoint after endpoint, so we can adopt it incrementally. So last thing to do, we can update the chart, and I myself put it right here. Slightly more effort because you just don't get it out of the box. You have to do something, but slightly more reward than the RPC because you can specify even like less parameters every time. And that's it. Thank you.
It was very interesting. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions, guys? I have one. Have you dealt with any other servers than written in JavaScript?
Sorry?
Have you dealt with any server which wasn't written in JavaScript?
Like in general, or
yeah.
like?
Well, did your solution it only works with one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like the whole point is having this JavaScript object that has all the informations. I guess if you like really wanted to, you could maybe use it somewhere else, but I don't think there is a point.
Yeah, because this is something we are trying to solve in our company.
Okay.
About the backend is actually in .NET, so.
I don't know. Good idea.
Yeah,
just
ask
think about it later.
Sure.
But yeah, from the top of my head, I don't think it would be like easy to use it on like backend. But the type are pretty much static, so I think it would be really about like either generating like TypeScript types from .NET types or vice versa.
Or using Zod schema or anything similar. This interface definition between backend and
And
front.
you can use Zod in .NET somehow?
I don't know. I'm just saying something something that generates similar schema to that, like JSON schema, something like that, and then transfer the schema.
Yeah, I think it would be really just some code generator like that.
Then
Sounds
you are back
good.
in generating code, right?
Yeah, but yeah, in this case, there's just it would make sense in this case. So,
I guess my question will be pretty basic. So in the final solution you showed which part of this is actually purely TypeScript, so only dealing with the types of the result, versus runtime? So like you mentioned that was response validation. Is Zod responsible for that?
Yes, yes.
So that's essentially the only, so the only runtime part of the contract is the Zod schema that is loading in the input and the output. The rest of it is just the TypeScript.
Yeah, everything is
compiler
TypeScript, just some Zod schema parsing, as you mentioned. You can even turn it off. It's not turned on by default because they want to ship Zod the front end if you don't want it. But there is just one flag, and you can turn it on and then get the dates out of strings.
Yeah, so Zod is not coupled, this library is not coupled to Zod?
Like, I mean, the whole like API contract is built around Zod. I'm not really sure if you can opt out of it. Like there definitely needs to be some like library like that. I guess you could replace it with you know, Bodybot or something like that. But yeah, I would have to take a look in the documentation. Like they mentioned Zod like all over the place. I'm not sure if there's a way out.
Maybe you can replace it with something like Yoop or something.
Well, I think I created my own parsing library for my company, so it can be interesting. But like this TRCP, they seem to have a Zod like built into it.
Yeah.
So
But you know, for me, like one of the biggest takeaways is that it's not the hardest thing to just check out the repo and change stuff. So.
Any other questions? If not, thank you again very much.
Yeah.